Well, I think it's important to recognize that Juan Guaido didn't just come out of nowhere. The Venezuelan National Assembly was elected democratically in December of 2015, and it was an election in which the opposition won two-thirds of the seats in the assembly. So it really has this democratic legitimacy that Maduro simply doesn't have. There were presidential elections last May that the international community widely condemned as illegitimate. And then I think what has brought all of this to a head is the fact that he was inaugurated for a second term on January 10th. And after that, the assembly, which had chosen Guaido as its new leader, Guaido stepped forward and declared himself interim president. So it's not just a question of two leaders, two people claiming the presidency. It's really somebody emerging out of the National Assembly, which is the body that has the democratic legitimacy in Venezuela. I think it's enormously important that the number of major countries in Europe, in Latin America, the United States, Canada, have all now recognized Guaido, and it's an enormous transfer of international legitimacy to someone other than the current government.
James, do we know what options European foreign ministers who support Guaido are considering? Could there be sort of coordinated sanctions put on Venezuela?
I think there's talk about sanctions. I'd be surprised. They have to be agreed unanimously. They're legal document, they're legal things. You're not going to get unanimity within the Europeans on that. I think it's possible they could support some kind of humanitarian action. I know the Americans are thinking about that, but it's not something that their priority at the moment. Initially, their view is, look, let's just make sure we've got our support for the opposition leader is there, public and established. They know ultimately this is going to be decided by the people of Venezuela themselves and by institutions, particularly the army themselves. So it's essentially a demonstration of international support. Say to the army, look, this is the breadth of the international coalition that is now forming. It's not entire. We know that other countries, you mentioned them, Russia, China and others, are not supporting what the Europeans have done. But I think the coalition now in support of Guaido has just got substantially larger.
Cynthia, obviously what the army does next is so crucial, but is there a danger that Maduro will simply dig in?
Well, I think that's what he's already done, and he has launched these special police forces, which are operating essentially as death squads, into poor neighborhoods. And I think one of the big differences between this moment and previous moments in Venezuela is that poor people are increasingly opposed to the regime, and they are really bearing the brunt of the repression right now. So I think that Maduro's response has been to repress, but it's notable, and Venezuelan analysts have pointed out that it's notable that he is using these special police and not the army, not the National Guard, in order to not further provoke an internal split. So far, it's not clear where the military high command stands. These are people who own significant state enterprises, have control of the oil sector, of the mining sector, of food distribution, and there's a lot to be lost. These are also people heavily involved in forms of organized crime and the illicit economy in Venezuela. So there's a lot to be lost. And I think Guaido has been extremely intelligent in making clear that there's an amnesty, that he's not looking to put people behind bars, and he's actively courting their support. So far, there have been very few visible cracks, but we'll see what happens as time goes on and the oxygen for the regime really disappears even more than it's disappeared, particularly with the oil sanctions declared by the United States last week.